Today, we're going to meet the author of a brilliant New World Guide to Animal Medicine that's become one of my top 10 favorite books and a go-to guide in my library. Hi, it's Cheryl Sitz here with a brand new conscious conversation on exploring possibilities, broadcasting on journeyofpossibilities.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube/Cheryl Sitz. Our guest Lori Morrison will join us right after a word from Mario Rosales. Mario, would you take just a moment to talk to our listeners about how you can help them? Everything from website development to teaching them how they can do it on their own and so much more to increase their online presence.
Well, thanks, Cheryl. One of the things that I can help with, when you have a website, you know what you want. You want where that graphic is, or you know what text you want to update. That's one of the parts that I can help you with. How many times has a web developer given you a high bill for something that you think is pretty easy? I have various type of programs, and I am very flexible in working with how to create a program that works for you. For example, I can do the work for you. That's one. But really, I love empowering you as the user because I know you know what you like. I can show you how to do that modification on that website. And we can have even a hybrid program where I can show you, or some of them you give them to me. And we have a monthly fee on those. So there's a lot of different ways. Yes, I can do the hourly, I can do the monthly package where I do everything for you, but don't you want to be the one in control of your website? Those are the kind of things I can provide you, solutions that empower you. Find out more about them on mariorosales.net or techlifebalance.net.
Lori Morrison is the author of The Shaman's Guide to Power Animals, a rich, insightful publication that I can't wait to talk about today. Lori is a best-selling author, inspirationalist, and mystic. You can find out all about her on her website, lorimorrison.com, which we'll have tagged on this podcast, and we welcome her now. Hi, Lori.
Hi there, Cheryl. Nice to meet you and nice to be with all your pals today.
Oh, I'm so glad you could join us because I have just soaked up every bit of this book and it really has become one of my favorites. So I can't wait to dive in.
Awesome.
I'm curious how you first came into a shamanic style of path for your work.
Well, I really did not have any knowledge of shamanism. I was not at all aware of, the path of shamanism, or if people would even do that. I was very much a business person, entrepreneur. I was living in Central America. I was working on real estate projects and things like that. And my husband died. And a year later, on my 52nd birthday, that is a date that I found out later that for the Mayans is probably one of the most important dates in our lifespan. And that is when the Gregorian calendar intersects with the Mayan calendar. And it kind of creates a portal in which those of us who are going to go through some type of spiritual awakening or transition, that's usually when it happens. And so that day I was out on my I lived on a lake, and I was out in the lawn area, and a cloud just appeared above me and started raining on me.
Wow.
And it was a wow. Because I was like, what is that all about?
Yeah.
And I had my cook there, and I had some people, staff there, and they came out and they were like, Senora, what's going on? I said, I don't know. So that was the first thing. And then I started seeing like these beams around the property, like you'd see these really strong beams of light around there. And so we thought that was very strange. And then all of a sudden one day, the entire, I guess you would call it the veil of this existence on the plane that we live on now just dropped. And I found myself looking at a Mayan village. And of course, I was scratching my head and rubbing my eyes. And saying, why can I see these things? And then I had 4 jaguars appear, and they started communicating with me.
Wow.
And that evening, I was told to go out to the point on my property, and 13 ancestral spirits came and stood around me and asked me to lay down on the ground and told me that I would be initiated. And so a beam of light entered me. And for 3 hours, I was gone from my consciousness. And when I came back, I could only perceive the world through a lens of sacred geometry. And I was stuck in what you might call the 5th and fourth dimension of existence for 2 years.
For 2 years?
For 2 years, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen some of what you describe working with entheogens or, sacred plant medicines, but never like just in my daily, okay, now I'm with the Mayans and now I'm in sacred geometry. I can't even imagine. Were you secluded during that time, or were you functioning out in the world like that?
Well, I tried desperately to function. I also was able to speak a very ancient language, which they believed was some Mayan. So nobody really recognized it. And I was I had 7 out-of-body experiences. So it became really difficult because I never knew if I was just floating around somewhere or if I was solid on the third dimension. So it was chaos. Chaos ensued. And I ended up in mental hospitals and everyone trying to figure out, what was wrong with me when I thought everything was okay. I was like, I'm just seeing stuff that you guys can't see. That's all.
Exactly.
And, but that doesn't work in our world.
No.
It got very convoluted. And then finally I met a wonderful mystic, Deborah, who was my mentor. She's probably one of the most amazing people I've met, and her colleague, a friend, is a Haitian shaman, third generation, taught by her great grandmother, and they could see that what was going on, and so they just so graciously intervened into my life at that time and kind of worked with me for those 2 years to put me back together again.
Wow. There's just so much wow there. I'm taking a minute to even catch up with where you are in this story. I think it's inspiring to us on so many levels that there can be an awakening later in life. There's so many young people walking around now who are completely wide open, switched on, all their gifts flowing. And some of us woke up a lot later in life, and I did too. And like you, I had somebody show up to ironically rent a room in my house at the time that I started working with the plant medicine and basically coming in and out of this realm. And I'm so glad that he was there to anchor me, but he had a similar story where he had spent time in a mental hospital, because I think when they can't understand what we're saying and doing, that's where they put us to feel safe with us, right? They need to go get locked up.
And also for us to feel safe with ourselves, But I found out later that after I was in the mental hospitals, that I was actually there to heal people.
He says the same thing.
Because I could see what was going on with them. So I worked with several people while I was in fact, people were getting out while I was in there. And I kind of kept saying to the, spirits who were working with me, I said, do I get out or do I just stay here and keep getting all these people better? And so that was, kind of interesting. But then I did finally end up, someone suggested that I go to work with people in South America. And since I spoke fluent Spanish, it was easy to go. And so I went and spent a couple of weeks with a group of indigenous peoples in Colombia, and they worked with me. But they told me it was one of the few people they see so dramatically fractured, because most people die.
Yeah.
So it was very rare that I survived it.
Wow. Well, I have a similar instance where I was denied ayahuasca when I took a trip to Peru and was asking for it to have the rest of my awakening or whatever, because I wasn't ready to see and feel all those things yet. And I'm very grateful that I was denied that, because I think you can get so much information so fast that it does leave you broken in two, and people do check out.
Yeah, and it became very seamless between the dimensional spaces, because I used to walk in the kitchen and wave my arms to see if anyone could see me, because I didn't know. I could never detect if I was ethereal or if I was solid.
So you had a family at this time that was with you in the house while you were going through this?
I just had my cook and my housekeeper.
And what were they thinking?
They were really, it was hard on them.
Yeah.
And, one day, because the vibrational, I was so open, I threw away every single electronic piece of equipment that I had in my house into my swimming pool.
Oh.
Except for the big screen TV because I couldn't lift it. Yeah, I literally took the microwave out of the wall.
Wow.
And put everything in the pool, and they woke up the next morning and everything was floating in the pool.
Oh my gosh.
And then they're looking at me like, what's that all about? And of course, I couldn't explain to them that I had to stop I couldn't stop the vibrational energy coming into my head and the voices and everything else. And so I had no way to manage it. I had no template. No, I had nobody. I was Googling light beam hits person. What do you do?
Wow.
How do you find this? But, there was, and this was, almost 10 years ago. There wasn't a lot out there. But then I had a tremendous amount of empathy for the Mayan people, like 1,000 times more than I did just living there. And I finally met one of the grandfathers of the Mayan community. I brought him. It was a 4-hour drive from way up in the mountains. I called and asked for him to come. And of course, he knew that he knew why he was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And he got to my home and he said, you were supposed to live here. This is a portal. There will be much work to be done. So I did a lot of work with the spirit guides. My whole shamanic initiation was with spirits. I did not take a class, although I did some work with Michael Harner's groups and some of that. But most it was all done just me and these spirits, initiation, by spirits. And then I was told that I had a very important task for 2012. And I spent 6 months working on that with them. So that's what happened. And I did write my memoir about the whole experience. It's a page turner.
I'll be reading that next.
Yeah, it's a page turner for sure.
Well, I want to speak to your comment about initiation by spirits, because that is, I feel like, the best way we can get unstuck from the repeating cycles that we're stuck in on Earth is to bring in as much information as we can from the right sources outside of this place. Would you agree with that? Would you have caution words with that? What would you say to that?
Well, I think as long as you know the source and you're comfortable with the source, and that took me a while to really know what was the pure message, because there's a lot of deceitful messages that can come from any place. But after I kind of grounded and nailed it as to who was working with me and realized that I had these very high-powered, benevolent beings who were, had nothing but the best for the people I was working with and also for myself. When I realized that, then I thought, well, I have a really powerful ally here to work with, in my life, and they've just done remarkable things through me to support my clients and people who are looking for healing and other things.
So I want to refer to something that you write about in the Animal Spirit book that is so good. You talk about the shaman, and there's a lot being said about shamans right now because it's hip and trendy to be a shaman, to be on the shamanic path. Everybody's drinking ayahuasca and talking about DMT. And you come along and say, very few people attain all the aspects of the lifestyle, and a true shaman is chosen by spirits, and it's considered to be a curse in most tribal societies. And you talk about how it's a very selfless path of service and not as hip and trendy as everybody makes it sound. But you don't do it in a way that's angry or rejecting modern society. You just do it in a very loving, pure way. I appreciate you sharing that so much.
Oh, thank you. Yes. After this happened, I studied every kind of angle of shamanism I could, because I was trying to figure out, how come I knew these things? How come I had this sudden knowledge of plant medicine? Where did that come from? And, how did I just get this drop in of knowledge? And so I went out in the world to try to, to figure that out. And when I did that, I, got deep into the study of, who are shamans? How do they come about? Where do they live? How do they live? Things like that. And I realized that, that's when I got this information, that I realized, this is not a weekend seminar, kind of deal. And it is a sacrifice. In fact, when I met the Tatabuelo, who's the head of the Mayan there, he had 11, young men who were studying with him. And like he said, there were two women, and he said, to them, they've given up their entire life for this, and to learn from him, because most of the learning is done verbally. There's no books to read, and so you really make you make a commitment, and you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So even what I do, I don't consider myself, that kind of effort. So whatever we call it, whatever degree we are of shamanism, it varies. But I do know one thing is that a shaman is called. It's not something you sign up for.
Right. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Exactly. And, for me, at least, bringing some of the shamanic perspectives into my daily life. It's not, for me, I'm not here to be a shaman, but I am here to embody the spirit essence that is in everything and the respect that they bring to all life. And that's where I think we've kind of gone astray in our modern world, where we can learn a lot from just some of that lifestyle, even beyond the drumming and the ceremonies and the, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, shamans have this whole different point of view, and it's an absolutely beautiful and stunning way to live your life. And so that's where they become these great teachers, is, kind of unraveling all of the conditioning that we have, and then going back to the natural world and seeing that we can actually have a relationship with everything around us. And, but when we can do that, we can live a pretty fulfilled life.
Yes.
And we can get back to the basics. And so it's not really becoming a shaman to be like that. It's just understanding the teachings of a shaman to incorporate in your own life.
And I think that this animal medicine book is a great way that anyone can start to play with being more aware of the life that shows up around us, whether we're in the city or the country. Notice what's showing up. Notice maybe what that's trying to say to us in terms of, why am I attracting the vibration of this bird or that animal? Your book does it's so straightforward. You start out talking about shamanism, upper world, middle world, lower world, the different types of power animals. I think that is even something that we should touch on here, because not a lot of people know that there's a difference between like a totem and a power animal. And you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. A power animal can be any living creature. So it can be an insect, it can be a worm, it can be whatever. We tend to think, wolf and bear and things like that. In fact, honestly, some of the most, what we might think are insignificant, have some of the greatest powers. That was what I learned when I wrote the book. So, you might become aware of your power animal, like if you're meditating, or you might just see it over and over. Perhaps even a shaman, would introduce it to you. And that is kind of the animal that I feel. When I did the research on it, I felt that there was kind of always this this one animal that was present. And I believe this animal is present at birth. And indigenous communities back up that information, because mostly when a child is born, they're kind of assigned, or it's determined by the shaman what animal will be accompanying that child on its journey. Now, that's not to say that the child or that person would not incorporate another animal in its journey, because there's also animals that can come in for certain projects. If I need help with maybe trust issues, for example, I might call in the gopher. So it's not going to just be my all in all the rest of my life power animal. I might call in others, and those would be just kind of the animals that you call in to work with during your life. We also have a totem animal, and you see the totem poles from the indigenous communities. Those were animals that were kind of the ancestral animal that gave them the name of their clan. For example, the bear clan, or the rabbit clan, or whatever. They often thought that they that they came from those animals. There's also power animal messengers. When that moment when a bird sits on your shoulder. I've had that happen actually. Or when, a bird appears, what does that mean? One time I was on a walk with my dog and I had a cardinal hopping, not flying, but hopping along with me for 5 blocks. And, that's not a normal behavior. So it definitely got my attention. And so I was very quick to get home and find out what that was all about because it just seemed odd. So if you see them, acting in a kind of an uncharacteristic way, a lot of times that's a huge message. And then we also have what I call the shadow power animal. And that is the animal that appears to bring awareness to you about something you're maybe not, focusing on at that time. And that might be like the inner work that needs to be done. And so sometimes you'll read about it and you'll say, well, this isn't me right now. Well, it's trying to tell you something that's what you need to work on.
So funny because as you were running down all these different types, I was going, and there's where that shows up, and oh, that's what that is, and oh, yeah, I know who that is. And somewhere in here, you were also talking about that it can be an entire category of animals, right? Like birds can be the overarching thing, and you have different birds for different things. Didn't you say something about that in the book? I don't remember exactly where it was, but
yes, you can call on power animals for a million different things. One of my media consultants, she called me or she wrote me and she said, "Hey, Lori, my car's broke down today and I'm having all these problems. I don't even know if I need a new car and all this." And I said, "Well, call in the camel. He's all about transportation." She's like, "Oh, really? Okay, I didn't think about that." I said, "Yeah, call him in." And then about 2 hours later, she's like, "Okay, everything's fixed. It's all done. Got it. Perfectly fine. Thank you, Mr. Camel."
That's awesome. So I haven't done much work with actually calling in usually they show up for me. I get a lot of messengers, animal messengers as it were, but not as much calling them in just from the blue like that. So how would I know what animal to call in or when to do that?
Well, the book is really helpful because I organized it by the animals and their powers. And also I added the minerals that resonate with them. And I can go into that a little further. But so you'll see all the different powers. So for example, if I can go through my book, I'm just looking through here now, and it can say, okay, I'm looking for new beginnings. I just moved. I'm looking to start anew. Okay, so that would be crocodile. Okay, so I would be maybe starting my new move or maybe moving across country or whatever. I would ask the crocodile to come on my journey with me. And then as I get started in my new community or in my new job or in my new place, I would have crocodile. I would call him in and just simply say, "Crocodile, please come into my life at this time. Please work with me as I make this new beginning." Because, the crocodile, these are the actual phrases. I asked each animal, I said, "Give me a kind of a quote for humanity." And they channeled it through me. And the crocodile was about linking renewal with dissolution. And the crocodile says, "I can assure safe passage into the lower world," which is the lower world of the shaman. And it's a fertile place for creation. So when you're trying to create a new life or something. The crocodile is also very good for people who are having mental health issues. And so that would be included here because it's very helpful in letting go of things. And when, mental health issues, a lot of times are just too much stuff in your head that you can't get rid of.
Yeah. Too much mind and not enough of the rest of the wheel, right?
Everything's spinning around. So you can call crocodile and they'll be it's very good. Crocodiles also, it says like the awareness is to stop clinging to the shore, jump in and trust the river to take you where you need to go. Or you've had some very rational thinking and you need to get organized with your thinking. So you can use them like that. And the word power is not an exaggeration. It is extremely powerful to work with these spirits. My whole initiation, my whole venture into this world, I was taught by 4 jaguars and 13 ancestral spirits. And there's no class on my planet that could have done that. And, I tell this story about when I was writing the book and I needed to find an apartment or a new place to live, a new home in Sedona, which is very difficult. It's very, very hard to find a place to rent here. And I had my pets and everything. And so I got my book out and I looked and said, mouse, it's great for finding a house. And so I called the mouse in. I said, all right, mouse, you are going to find me a place. And within 15 minutes, I had a place to live.
Wow.
Just driving around, I found a house. It had a little sign on it written in like a little felt pen. I mean, it was that, I would have never found it looking online. And it was the perfect place, and talked to the owner, and she's like, sure, I don't mind the pets. And I had they had them with me so they could see what they look like. And I had my house.
That's such a great story, not only for how we can work with our power animals, with their spirits, but just in general, how easy life can be. Like, we make it so much work, and it really can be in synchronistic flow. And I'm still discovering that at new levels every day, where I'm working way too hard at something that doesn't need to be so difficult. If we can just begin to harmonize more with all that's around us.
Yes, and to get the bigger picture, birds are great about that. I mean, eagles and hawks, they fly so high and they can just zero in on the target. So whatever you're looking for, I've had them help find, like, if I lost my jewelry, I have the blue jays because they will actually steal shiny objects. So I'm like, okay, I can't find, where is this? I'm like, blue jay, get in here. Can't find my earring. So I use them in that way. And I tell you, it's always very powerful. I'm never disappointed. They always show up and they always work with me.
That is so cool. And I can tell just by your energy that you appreciate them and show gratitude back, which I think is important too. We need to say thank you more and ask for the help and then appreciate it when it shows up.
Yes, like for example, when the mouse found my house, then I took some cheese outside and put some, honored some little pieces of cheese outside to the mouse community. So, it is that gratitude, that appreciation of nature, something that we don't have. We've lost touch with that. The indigenous peoples used to sit around and have conversations about, why the raccoon was so clever. Just like we might sit around and talk about somebody like, it's really interesting what this guy did. Well, they would do the same thing, but they would talk about animals because they were their family.
Yeah.
And they would, in fact, the indigenous people call them brothers and sisters. They don't call them raccoons. They'll call it brother raccoon.
Oh, I love that. Because
it's part of the family. So, and they used animals to teach their kids, different lessons. They would say, okay, now here's how the coyote acts. Now the kids would learn about, behaviors, through the coyote's behaviors. So there was a lot of very interesting ways that we used animals to understand survival. It was a big one for the indigenous communities. Look at how the mountain lion survives. They were huge teachers.
Yes, they are. I want to just say again how impressed I am with the layout of your book. It's a book that I got, and literally the first day I looked up an animal, and it was in 2 seconds I was reading about. The animals are in alphabetical order. Everything is very clear about them. On each animal, there's like the top 3 things that they're known for. I just flipped to rabbit: vulnerability, creation, and abundance. There's a quote channeled by rabbit, and then there's properties about the rabbit. And on some of them, there are the powers, the awarenesses, the energy center, the mineral, the element. I mean, you've really done a comprehensive job on all these animals. And then at the back of the book, you've got an alphabetical chart that lists what the different powers are and what the minerals are for all the animals as like a quick go-to guide. It's very, very user-friendly. Thank you for making a book that I can actually pick up and find what I'm looking for when I need it.
Well, yeah, that was kind of my problem because I've worked with animal spirits a lot, and I said, I just want a book where I can just pull it off the shelf and go, okay, I just saw, like someone just wrote to me yesterday that they just saw a weasel, they're like, I haven't seen this weasel for like months, years, and now the weasel shows up. And they said it was so great because I could just go over to my shelf and pull out and say, what does that mean? And she was saying it was just so profound at that moment. That was the information she needed at that exact moment was what the weasel had to say.
Exactly. Timing
Yeah.
is so important on that stuff. And nothing against Ted Andrews. I am so grateful for the Ted Andrews books that have been my companions since I first discovered animal medicine. And I'm crazy about animal medicine, by the way. It's not just the shamanic. I do this every day. Anybody could ask Mario. I'm like, wow, now there's a deer in my yard. Guess what I need to be working on, or what they're showing me. And it's nice to have something that's so user-friendly and comprehensive. And so now I've got all three of them together, and I refer between all of them. But one thing that I think is important about animal medicine is these readings are great and they're excellent prompts and they're so insightful, but then there's usually something a little more that comes through just for us. If we use them as a prompt to go into the space and ask for more, we can find out more about what that animal wanted to say to us. It's kind of a great way to open the door and start listening, I guess is what I mean to say.
Yes, and that was what was interesting about this book, because I went through the normal research of what they're like and their characteristics and what they do, and I wanted very much to get the indigenous take. In other words, I want people to know, what did the Incas think of this animal, or what did the Mayans think, and what was their take on it. And most of the information that I got came from art history, of all places, because all of the pots, all of the glyphs and things, that's where we found out about the meaning of animals to those people. In Egypt, for example, King Tut was buried with a donkey. Why? So a lot of this came up through some of the artwork, which was kind of fun to kind of venture out into that. And then at the end of each page, the animals would come in as I was writing about them. And I could sense their energy. I could sense their kind of interest in sharing with me. Had some pretty remarkable experience. One time, the ostrich merged with me, and I couldn't get the ostrich out. that was an interesting day. So they merged with me a lot, and they wanted to share. There was a lot of openness and wanting to share with humanity. So the last third of each animal is their actual message for us. So it's not coming from me, it's coming from them. And I think that gave it that deeper and more profound sense of what that animal truly means. And a lot of times they were telling me things that didn't make sense to me, but I tried to be as authentic as I could to their message, because I knew it was going to mean something to somebody.
Well, I tell you what, I've looked up several animals now. I've probably used a good fourth of the book on personal experience, and it has not disappointed one time. I get covered with goosebumps. I'll be drawn to tears. It's like, wow, this is so exactly what's going on with me right now and what I needed to hear. I have to go back before I lose track of it. Why was King Tut buried with a donkey?
Well, people don't know, but donkeys were extremely revered. And donkey was one of my favorite in the book. I mean, they were all wonderful, but donkey was especially interesting to me because it was such a stabilizing force. They'll always, if you have horses, there'll always be a donkey. In a farm or ranch, they'll always have the donkey. And the donkey was about humility. And, what the donkey said to me was, be kind to those who carry the burden of your innocence and ignorance as they walk with you through the peaks and valleys of your personal discovery. And they do take on the burden of so many things. And, they can also help us with our own burdens. And I just found them to be extremely calming, very, very calming creature, and very, a lot of humility, and also extremely patient.
Thank you for that share. I just recognize that I definitely want to call in some donkey with what's going on in my life right now. So that was just perfect timing.
Yeah, and I felt with the King Tut thing, I felt that it was about humility. That was my own, personal feeling about it. It had something to do with humility. So it's kind of interesting. But what I did too is, a lot of people, were calling me and saying, Lori, what's my power animal? What was my power animal when I was born? And that's a process that takes, a shaman. You can take upwards to an hour, even more, to go through those ceremonies. And so what I did was I'm working with a program that was designed in Europe. It's extremely fascinating, based on scalar energy, the old Tesla theory of things. And what it does is I'm able to program a person into, in other words, your birth date, your birthplace, and your name that you most resonate. And I can actually find your energetic footprint on a field. And then I can ask the field to determine what animal was present at your birth. What animal had the highest level of energy at your birth. And I take all the animals and I scan them against your energetic footprint, and I see what pops up.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
Then I use my own intuition to say, okay, yes, that feels right. That feels like that was the animal there, so that I'm not having to go through this hour ceremony that I would normally do. And so it shortens the period of time in which I'm able to extract that information. And then, of course, at that moment, I work with that animal and I say, I would like to, reveal this animal to this person. And of course, they're always grateful for me asking. And then I send that information out.
So that's a service that they can find on your website if they get this book and they really want to know more about their specific animal.
Right. And sometimes it's extremely surprising. Like, for example, my mother, who's 84, says, oh, you've written this book and blah, blah, blah. And I say, yeah. She says, what's my power animal? So I told her it was the earthworm. And she was like, Lori, you just wrote a book about all these amazing animals and you're giving me the earthworm? I said, that's it. And so it took her a while, but she sat down, she sat with it, she read about it, and she says, I can see why this was my companion on my life journey. Because one of the things is the earthworm has 5 hearts. And my mother has 4 children and a husband she's been married to for 63 years.
Wow.
5 hearts. So there were a lot of, comparisons with her. And now she just has totally embraced the earthworm and thinks the earthworm is the greatest thing, that she can have. So that's why I say some of what we think is insignificant can have the most powerful meanings.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for all this sharing. I've really enjoyed talking about the animals. So one time I was looking for my animal message and I was looking for pill bugs or roly-polies and I couldn't find anything anywhere. So I actually wrote a blog on my website about roly-poly animal medicine. And that has been, to date, of all the stuff I've shared about healing trauma, about Peru, about everything, that's the thing that everybody finds and reads. It's so funny. So I know you've got a market.
I think we know this, because I had did some other interviews and stuff, and everyone tells me like this was the most downloaded interview I've ever done in the last 5 years, and I think we know this exists for us.
Yeah,
there's something inside of us that knows that we are connected to an animal in some way. And so when this comes up for somebody, it's like, wait, I gotta download that. I know inside there's something there. I had someone who I told her what her power animal was, and she signed up for it, and I told her it was a cougar, and she wrote back to me immediately, and she said, "Oh my God, Lori," she said, "I had a friend come over 5 years ago and hand me a painting of a cougar and said, I think this is yours." And she said, "I've had it hanging over my bed for 5 years. Now you tell me it's a cougar." Of course, I've never met her. Never been in her home. I don't even know where she lives. And so there is that innate sense that we're connected to something.
Yeah.
I've had people where I've given them the power animals, and they'll send me the pictures of the animal that they tattooed, and they didn't know why they picked that animal. So that validation sometimes through a shamanic process can be very helpful, because it's like, wow, I've had this companion with me all these years, and I haven't really developed a relationship with it, and I should probably be doing that, because I could use certainly the powers and intelligence of that creature.
Absolutely. I think anybody that isn't working with their power animals and their animal messengers is missing an entire realm of interpreting the world that is available to us at some level, any of us, because we've all got birds in the trees. We've all got a little patch of grass, even if it's the one that the city council mandated they put in the property when they plowed it all up. We've all got some little piece of nature that we can get to that is beaming with life, that's founded and is thriving there and wants to communicate with us. And then in the spiritual realm, of course, we can always call in these animals. So thank you for raising our awareness with your Shaman's Guide to Power Animals. I love your book.
Well, it's funny, because I now that I'm so aware of it, when I'm scrolling on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, there was like one day I saw like 15 kangaroos. And so I'm like, all right, there's something about a kangaroo I gotta find. So you can even get the messages through technology.
Oh, that's perfect.
You don't have to be on your backyard and wait for a kangaroo to pop over the fence.
Yes.
So it's everywhere. They can get to you in many ways, and it's surprising all the time to see how that happens.
Yes, pay attention to your dreams, because they show up there too.
Mm-hmm. That's another great place. Yeah.
Well, Lori, I've thoroughly enjoyed the talk, as I knew I would, and I ask all my guests as we wrap up if there's a parting thought that you would like to leave our listeners with today.
Well, I think I'm just going to open the page randomly to the book. And I'm going to ask all the animals in this book to tell me what message we need to leave today. Okay, I've got the mosquito. And I always, when someone gets a mosquito, I'm always like, oh boy, I'm in trouble. But the mosquito is about persistence, focus, and awareness. And the mosquito says to us today, we understand that blood is life, and it is what cleans and nourishes the body. It is the vital highway to health.
Wow. All that from the tiny mosquito. And, people slap at them and kill them when they sting and don't think anything about the message they might be bringing. So that was a perfect animal.
Mm-hmm. And with the 4th of July coming up, maybe I'll save a few mosquitoes this time. Most of the work I do is through medical intuitive work. And the first place that I go to clear up someone is the circulatory system. Mm-hmm. And so that's a very profound message from the mosquito.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lori. And again, website is LoriMorrison.com. The book we've been talking about is The Shaman's Guide to Power Animals. Lori, I can't wait to read your other books, and I hope our listeners will check out your book and your site and get in touch with you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. It's been a pleasure to be with you and all your friends today.
Oh, it's been our pleasure too. And listener, let us know what you think. Contact us info@journeyofpossibilities.com. And do me a favor, show us some support. You can do that at journeyofpossibilities.com/support. Even if you can't support us financially, show us some love, rate the show so others will find us. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week on Exploring Possibilities.